All right, ready to get started?
Man, I'm born ready. Let's do this
All right,
thing.
let's do it. All right, great. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to get this off the ground. We are going to be talking about the customer journey and how to innovate it for 2021. If you are just dialing in, definitely start to drop your company name, your role in the chat. Hope is we're going to keep this really engaging today. Take as many questions as we can. So start chiming in whenever you have them. Really context for today and how we got here. So big body of work for Skaled is, and really the DNA of who we are is really focused on creating the future of sales. And so that means for us, every day we are talking to buyers, we're talking to sellers, but a big body of work for us this year was really talking to modern day buyers, primarily sales leaders, and trying to understand their pain points. What have they been dealing with day in, day out, buying software, technology, other products, services, etc., from sellers. And from those interviews, we were able to really get a lot of feedback and intelligence around what is it going to take to be a truly forward operating seller in 2021. And there were a ton of amazing pieces of information, but what we were really able to do is boil this down into 6 buyer trends for 2021. And today we're going to be covering one of those. So that's going to be innovating the customer journey. I do have the one and only Jake Dunlap joining me today. So Jake, maybe you want to give a quick intro for all the people on the line who I'm sure have no idea who you are.
Well, if you're on my LinkedIn, I don't know how you found us, but thank you. If you're on Zoom, appreciate those of you who showed up. So I'm the CEO of Skaled. I think, for me, I talk to thousands of CEOs and sales leaders every year about what's new, what's popping, like what's working, what's not working. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to dive in and really talk through, again, trends that I see in my conversations every day. So let's get going.
Cool. And I'm Matt Lopez. I'm a partner at Skaled. I also lead some of our people operations departments. I've been working with Jay for almost 7 years now. I've worked with some of the smallest companies on the planet. I've worked with some of the largest companies on the planet. So looking forward to this, and we are going to rock and roll here. So before we dive into innovating the customer journey, I think it's probably helpful just to talk about what buyer trends are. And Jake, maybe you want to give a little bit of insight as to what the difference is between a buyer trend and an industry trend.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for a lot of times, what one of the big reasons why we launched this, right? So if you all go to Skaled, you can go check out our new buyer trend sections, which I think is like one of the best things that we've done from a consistent content. Industry trends tell you, hey, what's happening in human resources, what's happening in not even human resources. It's usually like what's happening in oil and gas, what's happening in XYZ, what's happening here. And the reality is most companies market and sell to people in an industry, but more, it's always first, it's the individual. And so what we decided to do is say, look, instead of focusing on another industry trend, what's happening in software, et cetera, we said, why don't we talk to buyers? Why don't we talk to different groups across industries to see if there are unifying trends or things that are specific? And so what we did is we released literally, I think almost 3-4 weeks ago, our first buyer trends section of the website. And it's focused on sales leaders. So we interviewed some very innovative, cutting edge sales leaders and said, hey, what are you buying right now? What are the challenges that you are actively trying to solve? And our goal here is that if you're in sales or if you're a CEO and you sell into kind of sales, customer success, even a little bleed of marketing, that you're going to walk away really having a better understanding of like getting inside the mind of the buyer, from people who aren't your current customers and are going to tell you, some filtered advice. These are people just saying, hey, look, high level, these are the things we're interested in. So I think that's where a lot of people are excited about this buyer trends and what it's going to do. Yeah. So that's the big reveal.
All right. Well, the big reveal is still coming.
That's true.
All right. So from our research and the conversations we had, we talked to some amazing leaders as a part of this. And we're actually going to share some very specific quotes and feedback that some of those leaders gave. So if you're on the call, shout out. There was really 6 trends that emerged. And these are really the trends that as a forward operating seller, we are encouraging and working with sellers every day to really think about how can you incorporate what you see here on the page into the way that you're selling, because this is what buyers are expecting of us. And so while we're going to be going deep on innovating the customer journey over the next 40, 50 minutes, we're going to be publishing a lot of content and doing other versions of what we're doing today on these other 5 trends as well. So keep your eyes peeled for those. But we're going to dive in. And so the big theme in innovating the customer journey is obviously this concept of how are we ultimately engaging customers throughout the sales process, and in many times before the sales process. And so these are really the 4 themes that emerge under how to innovate, in 2021 around the customer journey. Jake, why do you feel like, before we dive into each one of these are really the right 4 themes for innovating in the customer journey this year?
Well, I mean, look, the good part is this isn't like just my opinion. This is the opinion of lots of sales leaders. And so, that was one of the big, that's one of the big kind of, I guess like points that I want a lot of people to take away is that this isn't us sitting here saying, hey, this is our opinion. You should do this. You should do that. This is what these sales leaders are literally out there saying. And so I think for a lot of you, I think that's really my takeaway is that, forget people's opinions and talking heads, et cetera. What are the practitioners saying? And so, critical conversations in the sales cycle, right? How we're interacting and showing up, meaningful interactions, right? How are we actually showing up when we are showing up? Again, the difference between personalization and this kind of bulk bullshit personalization that's kind of permeated for the last, a year or two. And then tech, right? There's companies that are investing $700, $800, $1,000 a month per rep. So I think these are all things that are just top of mind that people are starting to realize need to get addressed now.
Yeah, 100%. Some of these, not the first time we've used these words. And it's like, well, what does this really look like? All right.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Getting into critical conversations, this is obviously the first theme. And John Eitel, who's an amazing sales leader over at Canva, gave us this really great quote as a part of the conversation we had with him, right? To set the table on what this is, right? And so he talks about the buying process is changing. The funnel model and the linear buyer's journey is no longer. The people that can enable and embrace people wherever they're at are going to be the winners. When you hear that, Jake, I'm sure that manifests differently for each person that reads it. How do you interpret it?
Well, I hope like a lot of people, I hope that it's that this idea, marketing in particular has been just we've been so focused on like generate a lead, medic it and close it. And I think what we're thinking about now is that, well, that's not really how it works. I mean, there is a process, right, that buyers follow to buy, but there's also, how is marketing supporting throughout? How are we nurturing and getting the right people in? It's not all just brute force. So again, I think more and more people are thinking about, meeting buyers where they're at, innovative new ways to get more people involved, ways to use marketing in the sales process more than ever.
Love it. All right, so we're gonna go a little deeper on this one. There's obviously a lot that goes into having critical conversations, and there's a lot of different ways that you can interpret it. And so these are just some of the tactics as you start to think about, well, what does this mean? And what does having critical conversations in the sales process mean? Right. So one that stands out for me personally is 5, the concept of multi-threading. Multi-threading is not a new concept, but how you do it in 2021, has evolved. And so, why multi-threading is important? What does it actually look like? When you're actually innovating the way you're selling today. There's a lot out there that suggests multi-threading is important. If you look at statistics by, I think it's Deloitte, by the time you're selling to a company with even 100 employees, there's at least 6 to 7 people who are going to be involved in that decision-making process, right? Like I know you've seen that one, Jake. And then, you couple that with other statistics or just think about, there's a great statistic by a company called Fierce. They do leadership development and training. And they talk about one of the major reasons why workplace failure happens is tied to the fact that as human beings, we are generally really bad at collaboration. And when you flip, 5 and you think about, well, what does this look like from the buyer's perspective? They're not looking at purchasing your software, your product as a sales process. They're looking at it as a project. There's an initiative in that business where they're trying to solve something important or achieve something important or, erode some issue. And knowing that there's a lot of different people involved in that process and it's hopefully a top priority for them, the best sellers, if they want to innovate the customer journey, they need to think about multi-threading as being the glue, as being the project manager in that business. And, going and having critical conversations with all of the different stakeholders who are really involved in that company, understand what's actually happening. Don't go and have a sales conversation with them. Understand what are they dealing with, and you think about how does that come together later in a proposal meeting or in a solutioning meeting where you're now an expert. You're adding real value in those conversations. I don't know how you've seen that, Jake, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's been a part of the process, right? Like we've always talked about how important, but like you said, I think it's Gartner actually. And it was, yeah, and I think the numbers just keep increasing every year. It's like, it's like over 200 employees. I think it's like, 7 people or something like that are involved. And, and I think too, it goes, some of the things we talked about before, we'll get into later around personalization. It's also how you show up for those individuals, right? That I think it's really interesting. If you look at most sales talk tracks, they've got like one demo. They've got like one way that we describe what we do. They've got one way that we, show up, or one way that we kind of talk about it. Well, the reality is you should be adjusting that based on if it's a CFO, a CTO, a CIO, a head of operations, a head of marketing, a head of sales, right? And especially for sales leaders, right? Sales leaders, right? Like many times if you're a VP of sales, which, a lot of this is around sales leader data. If you're a VP of sales, you're just going to take the recommendation of your team. Right. And a lot of people, we've always been taught, get to the DM. Well, the reality, I think, in today's buying cycle is the DM's got to believe in the ROI for sure, but they've got to feel just as confident. This isn't going to be another piece of shelfware, but this is going to be something that's actually going to drive momentum. The team is bought in and they're excited about too. So I think it goes both ways. I think a lot of times we think of multi-threading, it's this one or this one. So yeah. And actually, this actually is a really good, I don't know if you saw this question pop up, Matt, from MW, but it's kind of what I was just talking about. Legal to make sure, security, procurement, you can lose the deal there, but not often win the deal there. That's exactly right. And for this page, but I don't know if it's deceptive. Like if somebody can tank the deal, you need to interact with them, right? If someone can tank that, to me, like, it's like, I think about like how IT sometimes behaves in group meetings. I need to isolate them and make sure that they don't disrupt the process at times. So you're going to have to touch all 6 to 7 people. It would be my advice there. And if you don't focus on each individual, you're going to put the deal at jeopardy. And that's how I would think about that. But great question, MW. Appreciate that. And it's a good call out, right? That it's not just the decision maker. It's all these other people that you need to make sure you address.
Jake, one that's on here that I think it's talked about a lot, but I don't feel like a ton of tactical tips ever really come out of it is pre-meeting engagement. You've never met with this person. What am I supposed to do to actually engage with this person and create a better experience?
Well, there's a few things. One is, I even think about pre-meeting engagement, think about pre-meeting prep as well too. That I think sales prep for sales meetings, I feel like is a lost art, that people are just showing up. And because I think managers are just teaching them, like, just get to medic on the call. But pre-meeting engagement is really just people, what are different things you can do to get people excited? Hey, I know that we're meeting. There's a cool company, Reprise, and another one called Demo Stack, where they can basically pre-record like a 2 to 3 minute demo that's customized. Right? What can you do? Hey, I know we have this call. I customize this because of the other people I work on in your industry. Take a look at this thing. Or maybe I found an article or something that's interesting. What can you actually do to get people excited to meet with you? People go through, and I'm just doing what I just said, which is not a lot of work, is going to put you in the top 5% of companies, right? Most people are just showing up quasi not prepared. I mean, I cannot tell you how many demos I get on. People hit me up. It's so funny. We spend so much time trying to get the meeting. Right? Oh, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, whatever touch points. And then you show up and it's like, yeah, tell me about your business. I'm like, you tell me what you know about my business, and it's like, that's just not okay. That people are now, they're coming with a higher level of intent. They've probably done some research on you. And so you've got to think about how to get them excited for that meeting and then make sure that you're, really showing up prepared as well too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how this has probably changed with COVID and so many meetings now being virtual, and just thinking about how would you have prepared for that meeting if you were going to have done it in person. You're not showing up to that meeting empty-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was going to ask you about radical transparency, but we already have a quote here from Jake,
from me. It's weird. It's weird to be on a presentation or like like you're quoting me, but I can try to do my best.
Well, it was a good one. Yeah, radical transparency is when you're selling an organization freely gives access to information at every step of the process, and a buying organization is doing the same. You want to talk a little bit about what you meant there?
Yeah, I mean, this concept, again, I've talked a lot about this, that for a lot of people, I'm just kind of like thinking through like what's the quickest way to talk about this. Things like pricing, right? It's like, don't ever talk about price in the first call. Never. Don't ever talk about price. Make them have to get on the phone with you to give them a demo, or make them have to go through this horrible discovery process to give you a demo. Why? What year is this? Can you imagine if you had to buy an airline ticket through a travel agent right now? Yuck. Like, what if you had to, imagine if the only homes you had access to was through a realtor. Ugh. And then we're talking about, not, homes like a big purchase, like, almost, I think 70, 80% of homes now are found by the buyer. All these trends are coming to B2B. And I really feel like the companies that are going to win, and this is part of the consulting work that we're starting to move our clients toward, and certainly something I'm passionate about. The companies that are going to win are going to be the companies that remove the friction, and transparency removes friction. And we'll get into some other, I know we've got some more there, but giving the value without gates, talking about pricing, and giving a free information, and asking questions and asking for information to flow both ways. I think are all going to be big trends for this year and for next.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you haven't picked up that B2C is catching up, now's the time to do it, because they are, B2B is being impacted very quickly and
sure,
more real. I mean,
yeah, it's like, how many people, if you really think about it, you listen and audit your sales calls and you listen, you're going to hear it. The buyer's like, oh yeah, I blah, 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 blah. That is not how sales calls started 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago. And if you don't think that they're hitting Google, they're going to G2 or they're going to some other site ahead of time, maybe they found you via referral or whatever it was, they're going to Google you and they're going to do a little bit of research, right? And it's just a different mindset. Even if you got them via outbound, they're going to do some research.
We've got another question here, Jake. So are there ways or strategies to make buyers feel more comfortable sharing information? Asking about budget, timing is often met with hesitation or vague answers.
Yeah, one, this is a great question. And we should probably snip this question out and do a separate little short video on this, because I love this question. Part of this, I think why people struggle to get the right answers here is what we've forgotten about in sales are the techniques in terms of how and when to ask questions. And what I feel like we're doing with a lot of sales teams is we're saying, focus on this qualification criteria. You ask it like this. It's like, I don't really, ask a few questions about their business, but really we got to medic them. We got to bant them or whatever them. And so the question and the way you ask comes off weird. It just comes off weird, right? It's like, I've never actually, I've never made this analogy before, but it's like floating in my head now. It's like if you're on a date and you're like, all right, when are we going to wrap this thing up? Like, all right, what's the timeline here to we're moving in and getting married? It's like, what? We're on like our first date. What do you mean? What's the time? Like, or again, like we're asking about budget. I don't know what that, like the equivalent there. It's like, okay, great. So when are we going to go on our first vacation together? It's like, what? So I feel like what happens is we ask these questions in ways that are awkward. And it doesn't feel like we're doing it to be helpful. It feels like we're doing it because we're qualifying you. And I think that is what I would kind of put out there. And so, a good time to talk about this is, when you talk about a company's priorities, for example, and you say, hey, what are the top 2 priorities? It's this, tell me more. Why is that a priority? Da-da-da. I like this question. I say resources. Okay, so is this something that you all have put resources behind? People, initiatives, budget, et cetera. Is this something that really is a top 1 priority? Yes, Jake, it sure is. Okay, great. So now I've got them to say, hey, this is something we budgeted, right? And then when I get to the end of the call, I can say, great, well, look, it looks like there's a few options here. Help me to understand. So I'm going to put together 1 or 2 ideas. Like, have you all put together a budget for this? It's logical. You're at the last step. You told them you're going to put together a proposal, right? So that's it. And then right after that, I can say timing. Okay, great. So I'm going to put in some dates for this as well too. do you have an idea of when you all want to go live or when you want to see impact? What's this? Great. So ask it. You don't have to get every question in that first discovery. I actually think sometimes there's questions that it's better to build some rapport so it doesn't come across so awkward. And you're not asking to, they're asking their timeline to move in together in the first, 8 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, too soon.
Too soon.
The dating network.
Too soon and done very sloppily is the other thing I'd say. I don't know if sloppily is a word or not, but I'm using it.
Makes sense. All right, so moving into the second phase of this, and there's going to be overlap, and a lot of these themes, bleed into each other. But this concept of interactions to encourage buyers, right? And again, to set the table for this one, we had another great comment from Frank Tumania, another great sales leader doing amazing things over at Qgenda. And what Frank had to share was, you have to take some time to understand the customer. You have a brief moment to pique someone's interest, and if you're too salesy, you lose the busy exec, right? It sounds, relevant to even the point we were just making. So Jake, again, I mean, if you think about some of the things you're seeing some modern sellers do around in social, right? Obviously, we're showing a clip here from LinkedIn and other places. What are some of the tactics you're seeing sellers do to pique a buyer's interest and make sure that they're really capitalizing on that moment when it does come?
Oh man, again, the interesting part, like, even as we're going through these trends, it's like, my friends, nothing has changed. Like, this never went out of fashion. It's gotten real bad in the last few years. Meaning, again, as we've over-focused on efficiency over effectiveness, a friend of mine, Richard Harris, he taught me that saying, and I love it. I've used it like 80 times now. But we have this obsession with efficiency and more. And what it's caused is a degradation about the quality of the insights that we're gleaning from people and the quality of the interactions. And so the answer is actually both, right? It's about how do we become more effective. We're going to talk about technology later. And how do we make sure the quality of the interaction? For me, I think I was very fortunate, Matt. When I had I was in sports sales for a few years, and then I moved to Career Builder, and I was really fortunate. They had almost a philosophy around this, right? Which was, the very first question is out of your mouth. And so I've instilled this in all my teams is, how does this company make money? How does this company make money? And that used to that was just ingrained. And that's in every sales team I built. Very first question, you want to talk account strategy? How does this company make money? If you don't know how they make money, how can you help them? If you don't know how they make money and what a person in that company who's a VP of sales actually is going up because of who they are, where they're competitively, how can you actually help anybody? And it's that mindset, Matt, that I think people really struggle with. It's more, if you don't understand your customer, you don't understand the buyer, you don't understand how this company makes money versus this company versus this company, it is very difficult to put together or to sound like you actually know what you're talking about. So that's one, is that you have to take the time and invest to know how a company makes money and what these job titles actually do. How are they compensated, et cetera. The next thing is that I take meetings, my favorite meetings, and I know this for others too, the people that make me smarter. And you're not going to make me smarter by just telling me about your product. Maybe I'll pull out some insights. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But you make me smarter by saying, hey, Jake, here's what other consulting firms are done. Here's what we're seeing in the market. And so I think it's future. I think if you want to be a successful seller, I'm convinced in 2022, 2023 and beyond, you're going to have to stay up to speed on these trends. Again, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily anything new, but I think it's just going to be required now versus the top of the top. And then obviously LinkedIn's a great way to do it too, right? LinkedIn's a great way to, I'll give you an example. I won't use it because I was trying to work it to get a meeting. Gentleman I want to get a meeting with, randomly saw him. One of his comments was actually randomly on one of our clients' comment, which is awesome. So what do? I go in there. I'm like, hey, blah, blah, blah. This is really interesting. XYZ, and I guarantee, I tagged him and I tagged the person, and that person's gonna be like, what's the relationship here? What's going on? Right. So then when I reach out to that executive, oh, hey, I saw you on this, but guess what? Don't do it immediately after. Don't immediately, oh, I saw we have synergies and we know the same people. Again, there's so many analogies here, but like, you got to make things a little bit less desperate sounding. And so for me, if you want to engage executives, wait 4 days. Maybe I'll hit them up in a week and a half, right? What does that show? It shows I'm busy. I'm busy too. And when you are always, it's like whenever people say, oh, do you have time next week, right? It's like, okay, great. Like maybe, but if you ask me a week and a half, 2 weeks out, I'm definitely gonna have time. So I just think there's all these different nuances that you have to, this takes time. Look, I've learned all of this, right? This isn't something, I'm not born with this skill, right? Certainly wasn't taught it in college, or maybe there's a portion in my MBA, but these are things I've just learned through thousands and thousands of sales calls. And watching myself get blown up because I sound like an idiot in front of an executive, and looking at the common reasons why I struggled. And so I think for you, it's like, if you have to understand how the company makes money, and then you have to know how to add value on a consistent basis. And that's usually future looking.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, like timing and what you say really stand out. Just like timing, it's not immediate. It doesn't have to be immediate. And even if you look at the example, Mackenzie's actually someone, we didn't sell anything to her. She didn't buy anything from us. She works here now. But her whole process of coming to Skaled started, months, maybe a year before her first real interaction with Jake, and just reading his content, seeing his content, he didn't even know, that sale hypothetically is happening. But, your first touch point might not be what you think your first touch point is. And
that's right. I mean, our number one website traffic, we got, and we had a lead this morning I saw, and I think one yesterday, is referral or Jake's LinkedIn, right? It's not, I downloaded a piece of content and I clicked a thing and I signed up and now I read your ebook, etc. So it's, again, the way that people want to consume information, the way that you give value is still, you have to know your buyer though. You have to go deep. And that's why I think Frank's quote's so powerful.
Totally. We've got another question here about how much time do you spend researching the company, group, then the individual level?
Individual first. Okay, so this is critical. I'll go to the website first just so I can glance. And then again, because I've ran so many sales calls in my life, like I can pretty much look now, again, over time, this is what you have to understand. Over time, your prep time, it can shrink. But when I was 25, 26, 27, I would be taking 30 minutes for a 45-minute meeting. I'd be taking 30 minutes or so to because I'd be like, oh God, like, what does this mean? Like, I've never heard of a company like this. And then I go Google it and, I'm like, but over time now I can pretty much pull up a website in about 2 minutes, just be like, got it. And I'll look at their products. I'm like, got it. Okay. That means that they sell to this person, but it's because I'm 41 now. Right. And I've done it. I've done it so many times that so I would just say, it's probably when you're earlier in your career, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get up to speed on what the company does. But what I love about your question is, I would, if you said, Jake, you have to pick. You can actually not prep for the company, or you can prep for the individual. I would prep for the individual first, because I think about it as humans, right? We are, humans first, right? Like we have lives outside of work, et cetera. We're employees second. Then we're like company stewards, unless you go up the chain, right? If you go up the chain, that kind of bleeds, right? Because you're an SVP or a C-level executive. So for me, I look at their LinkedIn profile and I say, oh God, this person's been in the same job for 15 years and their LinkedIn profile has nothing on it. And when I Google their name, there's no speaking, there's no anything. Okay, well, what does that tell me? Then I start to prep. I'm going to talk about proven, safe, I'm not going to new, cutting edge, innovative, be a beta group. Now, granted, they might prove me wrong and I might I'll throw a little tester out there with a question, but I prep for the person more than anything. And I think through in my head, I very specifically remember, man, as a rep, just like staying up at night before meetings and I'd play, again, it's just like if you're an athlete, right? Like, what do you do? Like, I can't remember who it was. He's like, I play the whole game out in my head ahead of time. And that's what I would do in sales is I would play the whole game out ahead of time. Right. I would, yeah. And so I think for me, it's probably, I would say however long the meeting is, it's probably at least half of that time as a good. And if it's a big meeting, it's probably double the time. Hour-long meeting with a bunch of senior people, I'm probably going to spend 3 to 5 hours in prep for something like that.
Yeah, one of the pieces of feedback you gave me early days in Skaled that I still keep with me is just not worrying about over prep. You know, if you spent 15, 30 minutes prepping for that meeting and used 10% of that, that's fine, right? You never know when you're going to get into that meeting, when you're going to have needed to have done that, 110% level of prep. And as long as you go in prepping at that level every time, you're never going to be outclassed. You're always going to be able to, have a relevant, personalized level conversation.
And I don't know why, because I am somebody who's pretty, I don't know, ruthless with my time. I never looked at it as a negative. Someone no-shows, something happens, I never get upset. I never am like, because guess what? I went through that exercise. I learned about an industry or a company or whatever it is. And guess what? In 6 months, all of a sudden, I run into the exact same thing, identical. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. And guess what? Now my prep time's cut by 20 minutes. So I think I've just seen the cycles enough to know that, again, and prep is prep, but again, it's about understanding value for that. And prep is just a part of it.
All right. So this next topic here, again, really segues nicely into what we're getting at around engaging, buyers in these various stages of conversation. And this is the personalization piece. How do you give real value by personalizing? Personalization has been a buzzword in modern sales for, I don't know how long, last 5 years at least?
Yeah,
right? At least.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, what does this actually look like? Noel Christopher, another amazing sales leader, Renner's Warehouse, hits one tactic and technique on the head of the nail perfectly. Sellers should automatically know what I do. We just spent however many minutes talking about that. But if they don't know what I do and they're trying to sell me, then it's over. But when somebody comes to me and says, man, I watched that video and I really like what you said, already we're on a different level of conversation. Like, I know, Jake, as someone who puts out a ton of content, how does that impact the vibe of the conversation when someone comes in and can talk about, something that you've published or knows your philosophy around, whatever it might be in the world of sales or elsewhere?
I want to go back. Can you go back to the quote real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I want to call out what Noel's actually saying here. Okay. Is the video is a part of what he's saying, right? That you watched a video. The reality is most people, when they say that, let me give you, actually, you know what? I got an example in real time. I have a perfect example in real time. Let me go pull this thing up real quick. This is a guy on LinkedIn. Got it right here. Hope things are well. I know your podcast is mostly sales focused, but salespeople are one of the main groups that we're trying to reach over at Sweater. If you've listened to my podcast, we don't talk about sales. We talk nothing about sales. We talk about the people's journeys through as being entrepreneurs and CEOs and influencers. So right away, I'm like, you haven't listened to the podcast, bro. Like, there's no chance. So to me, it's about, do you know what I do as a CEO of a consulting? Like, do you actually, what he's saying here, you know what I do, meaning, what a CEO of a professional services company, and you've shown that you've done research. It's and. If you just, and I would almost prefer you actually know more about my role than to use that other stuff. Because again, people like this guy taint the market for everybody else. Oh, Jake, I watched that video. I really liked this thing you said. And it's like, well, you obviously might be fast forwarded to like minute 9, didn't hear the before or the after. And so the thing you said is actually wrong. So I think, to me, just understand this, that people are looking for personalization around, I get you. It's like what I was just talking about. I get you. I know what you're going through. I've talked to other industry, and operations leaders in industrial manufacturing. I got you. I know what's going on. Coupled with, and I might know you as a person by this other thing. That is true personalization.
I think for me, coming from a people operations background right now and spending so much time interviewing people and hiring people, I can tell you when someone enters that conversation and I can tell that they've done homework on either the company, myself, whatever it is, I just like that person more right off the bat.
Yeah.
I trust them. I feel confident that this is someone who understands the world that we live in and that this is going to be a relevant conversation. Like, it just starts off in a much different place. It's a lot less robotic. You just kind of, it just gets to that level so much faster. And I'm sure if I looked at the conversion rate of hires, that person probably gets hired more frequently too.
I mean, God forbid you showed up for an interview prepared. That's like a whole other conversation we can have. Is just, it's like, I got to be honest. I've been in an interview recently, last 6 months, where the person actually sounded really great. And I'm like, I'm terrified to ask this person how much homework they've done, because I'm guessing it's none. I mean, it's pretty shocking. People even at like mid to late stages of interviews, it's like, what are you doing? I know the great resignation is upon us, but what are you resigning for? Like, you don't even know what we do. Why do you want to work here? Like, yeah, we're cool people and everything, but you don't even know what the actual work is. So anyway, yeah, I think these are all pretty straightforward, right? LinkedIn, Google, I think those are some of the big ones that I use.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else to add there. Piquing interest at every level. We talked about this a little bit. Anything you're seeing people do in the actual, in a Zoom call or a Teams meeting to make it more personalized?
Well, you can join. I think and Becca can correct me if I'm wrong. I think actually on Monday at 1 Eastern, 12 Central, myself and my friend Kevin Dorsey, so for those of you know who Kevin, are actually going to talk about this topic at like a ton of depth, which is basically how to keep people engaged. But again, to me, this is more about what's engaging for this person. Like I gave that it's a good example. I told you the story of that person who's got 15 years of experience. And so I might talk to them a little bit more about safety and proven versus cutting edge. It's the same thing at how I'm going to customize the way that I show up for that meeting. I maybe am not going to go, instead, maybe I'm going to talk a little slower. Maybe I'm going to be a little bit more reserved, because it makes it easier for them to hear the message. So I'm not trying to be manipulative. I'm actually trying to make it easier for them to hear me. And I think sometimes salespeople don't pay attention. They don't learn those different gears of how to adjust pace, adjust cadence, posture, dress, to make it easier for someone to receive the message. And so that's what I think about a lot. So for a lot of you, and we'll get into a lot of like the tips about some other things that you can do, but just to kind of tie that all together, that I think is one of the most important things is, are you showing up, prepared, and are you showing up thinking about and being conscious of how you're showing up? That to me is, I think, kind of something that anybody can immediately address and take away.
Love that. Yeah, that's great. All right, we got one more of these. So we're going to round this out with, the concept of how technology is really being leveraged to enable the experience. And the statistic here, again, from John Eitel, he talks about how sales tools need to guide the buyer's journey while enabling sales to do the right work at the right time and make an impact. And, this one hits home for me, right? As someone who's done tons of consulting with our customers, you hear sales technology and you see how quickly sales technology is growing. And I mean, we at Skaled talk about sales technology all day. We know it's a difference maker between, a great team and a world-class team. But the easy misconception there is that just by implementing sales technology, that's going to make the difference. And where this can go wrong is where you are leveraging sales technology for the sake of sales technology, or the Richard Harris stat, right? Where you're looking at sales technology purely as an efficiency play, but not as an effectiveness play. And the beauty, if you look at some of these, some of the technology that we're using heavily, at Skaled or, with some of our clients, the beauty of how it's evolving is a lot of technology today is really enabling us to impact experience as well. Outreach, yeah, obviously, that can be abused, but if you're doing it right, that can create an amazing experience. Mural, Jake, how have you seen companies starting to use Mural? That's
not enough, man. Even us, right? I'm like, God, it's such a great tool. It's so awesome for collaboration. I think it's just, look, we tend to repeat what we know, right? And, even I think about a tool like Outreach, Matt, it's like people first new outreach as a tool used by SDRs to send emails more effectively and make a few calls. The problem is, as these tools evolve and they're doing 100 million ARR, and it is not even close to that's what you use it for. My best estimate, and maybe we should do a report on this, is that companies are probably using between 20 to 30% of what tech is capable of. And so I just, for so many companies, it's about, and I think the other thing that I'll say here, and I think this is John and I were talking, and I were talking about this, is the other thing is, not only are we not using it as much as we could, the systems aren't integrated as much as we should. I think for me, like one of the bigger issues is it's also distracting. That what I'm seeing too is that people are spending all this money on tools and it's distracting because they're not optimized. They're not, integrated. They're not being used their full capacity. And instead, a lot of times we're automating the wrong things and manually doing the wrong things. We're automating things we should be doing manually, and we're doing manual things that you can actually automate behind the scenes. So sales operations, revenue operations is evolving, but it's part of why we started our sales tech practice at Skaled. And this isn't a knock on sales ops or sales and rev ops. They just can't keep up. It's not possible. Like it's as an agency / consulting firm, it's just easier for us to keep up. And so, on the latest and greatest of what all these tools are doing, what the integrations look like. And so, I'm just really excited about where we're at in this space. I think, again, you look at a lot of these tools and people are investing in them. But again, to me, it's about, we're just still scratching the surface on the use case. And we're also not staying up to speed on how we should be using it tomorrow or the day or the year after or the year after.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at technology and a lot of times it's efficiency. And I think it's looking at these logos and thinking, how can I use this tool to impact the way the buyer feels? I think if you ask yourself that question when you look at this tool, you might think about using it differently.
Well, yeah, look at, I'll just call it Sendoso since it's right there. Let's talk about Sendoso. Think about, there's two different use cases. Step 5 of the sequence, because you've optimized, says send direct mail. And the options as a salesperson or rep or SDR is to just send this thing that my boss has said or somebody has said is the step 5 thing, or I've got a choice of 7 or 8 things. And based on the persona and looking, I send that thing. Who do you think is going to be more successful, right? It's going to be the latter person. The problem is, because we're looking for efficiency, we're putting everyone in the middle. And therefore, we're not really doing it's not really personalization. And I think if most companies are very, very honest with themselves, their definition of personalization is a fucking joke. It is literally the opposite. It's literally, I've had people say, well, we personalize the email. We put in like their company name and their title and their name. Like, those are called bulk fields. Those are like bulk input fields. And so we have got to realize that is not personalization, and that these tools actually can enable you to do personalization. But you also have to train and empower people too, which, as we do big change management projects around many of these technologies, it's the change management. And that's what people don't prep for enough in the sales org, right? They're like, oh, we went live. It's like, well, no, these tools need to be optimized over time, just like anything else.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, for me, one of the most innovative usages I've seen of any of these tools was Mural selling me Mural. And I don't know if you ever had that conversation with them, Jake, but for anyone who's not familiar, for anyone who's not familiar with Mural, I mean, it's a collaborative whiteboard, and you can have a lot of different people in there working on the same, essentially virtual whiteboard at the same time. And what they did an amazing job of, was the first time I'd ever seen this, they turned their discovery conversation into a visual map and used Mural to basically take you to the different visual sections of the conversation. And so I was able to follow along both audibly and watch what we were talking about. And essentially, as they're taking my responses, they're feeding it into this graphic that's ultimately building out the solution together. So, they're adding sort of a visual component to it. They're making it a mutual journey. It's something now we're both building together, and I can see it coming together, right? what made it dually, beneficial and just brilliant on their part is then I'm getting a demo of the product at the exact same time, since it's, they're using their own product to do it. But, to me, it's really, how do you kind of break out of the mold of, what you've seen for the last 5 years over and over and over again, and really look again at this technology and think about how can I just make this a better experience? We're in it, something that there's ownership on both sides and it feels like you're going through it together. So I think it's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to change, but in the meantime, it's like, how can you use these products differently than maybe you have, over the last few years?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So that's where we're at. Big theme here: understand the buyer if you want to understand the sale, right? So hopefully the intel from having these conversations with sales leaders has given you some tactical takeaways that you can now start to incorporate in the way that you're selling every day. If you have some questions, start to drop them in the chat. Would love to hear some of the ways that you feel you could use these trends, right, to bring significant value to your buyers, to help you on your sales journey. So we have some questions in here. All right, first one: you hit on intent data briefly for gathering information on buyers. How valuable or accurate do you think it is for knowing what buyers are interested in? I've heard mixed reviews.
Oh man, that makes two of us. It's interesting. We've got our marketing trends section that's live too. And I remember very specific, I was interviewing a marketing, 1,000+ person company CMO, and he's like, it's bullshit. He's like, dude, we've tested it. He's like, and we can't find an actual correlation between, a higher conversion rate based on purely intent data versus not. Look, I think you have to look at it as a directional barometer, not a map. Oh, that was good. That was good. That's actually the right answer. It's like, and maybe not barometer. It's like a directional, like really loose compass versus like a map that tells you where to get somewhere. The issue, I think, is a lot of people think intent data is a map, that it's like, this is exactly your market and who's doing it, et cetera. So, that's my take on intent data, that, look, it's another data point that can maybe that your ICP is this, and maybe it helps you to say it's maybe a little bit like this, but I promise you, if you make that your guiding light, there's a lot of noise in there too. That the intent data is all based on, most of the time it's based on third-party data through a third-party provider, meaning it's, a website traffic from a publisher site. It's something else. It's not somebody who actually filled out a form or said, I want to be contacted about this thing or that thing, So that's my take on it.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to it is sometimes being thoughtful about what are ways that intent data that you might be able to create yourself, or, be able to track from other third-party sources versus licensing a tool. Like one of the best use cases I've ever seen of one of our clients wanted intent data. Without getting too much into it, this company was trying to transform the way people bought single-family homes. And so, for them, it was a combination of personalization and efficiency, because people were coming and touring their homes, and they wanted to know, when do we actually have our sales team step in?
All right. Well, so that's different. B2C, because you can because the difference is I can cookie an individual. And whereas a lot of these intent data are trying to tell me the companies to go after, and then the individuals are like in a department. B2C intent data is critical, right? So I want to be very, very clear if anyone here is in B2C, because with B2C, I can get so much data points because I can track you specifically across the internet, right? And if you're doing some type of like retargeting and you're tracking that, but again, that's not as much like, in the B2B side, that's not what we're doing though. And so therefore the intent data is just wonky.
So it just needs to be more individual based.
Well, and it's like, and then how are you going to get that? Most intent data is actually account based. It's kind of crazy. Imagine what it's saying is most intent data, this company is in the market for conversational intelligence. Okay. Why? People from the IP address at IBM that we believe is the marketing department have been on websites with articles and looked at articles that said something about conversational intelligence. Okay. Who is that? Who is that? No fucking clue who it was. Okay. So somebody in marketing at IBM, there's probably 4,000 people in marketing at IBM, is interested in conversational intelligence. Where do I start? Now, is IBM a hot lead now? No. Yeah. And that's why I think that's where the BS comes in, right? So like I said, I think a lot of it's a little ridiculous, but I still think there's nothing wrong with another data point to help to point you like directionally. It's just not a map. And I think that's the caveat.
All right, we have one more question here. Puneet, thanks for sharing. Puneet's question is, totally agree with your take on personalization. What's your take on coaching your reps to personalize for real, even if at a lower volume, versus tool-driven personalization, which may be more scalable?
It's both. You can have your cake and eat it too. Meaning for you, Puneet, it's you can set up templates that have some really good things that aren't personalized. But I'm going to go back to it. When I remember this, when I started at Career Builder, I got handed a physical binder that was literally this thick, that had industries and within it, it's basically trends in the industries and buyers trends, like within like the industry of the people we sold into. That's what I studied to personalize my emails. And so I go back to, if you want your reps to personalize every week, do a 30-minute session on your buyer type. Actually, I'll tell another story. That's what I used to do. A guy I went to grad school with, he was a VP of operations at McKesson. And we, some of our clients sold into operations groups. So I hit up Jim. I said, hey, Jim, can I bring my sales team into the facility? And these, I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of square feet this McKesson campus is in Phoenix. And Jim did it. We spent an hour, we walked around. People got to see, they're like, so now when you're reaching out to a VP of operations at an enterprise company, boom, how are you going to personalize? You got to see it physically. And that's probably like the next level. But I would focus on teaching them who these people are, what they care about. Who are they? How do these companies make money? Who are these people? What do they care about? What does their job actually do? And then they'll be able to do their personalization, because they'll know that these are the things I should be talking about.
All right.
That's all I got.
That's all he's got. Well, look, appreciate everyone joining today. We are going to be sending out the recording, whether you're able to attend or not. We have all of our buyer trends published and readily available online. I believe Becca from our team has shared that in the chat, 6 buyer trends. You can find it on our website as well. Jake, appreciate you dropping some knowledge for the last hour.
Matt, appreciate you chiming in. It's good. We don't get to do this together very often. So it was great. And thank you everyone for showing up. Appreciate you. And like I said, if you're interested in, and Becca, I don't know if we have a link for well, if you're on LinkedIn, it's going to be on LinkedIn Live. So I'll probably post about it, but you can just follow me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in better ways to engage people via Zoom, that's what we're going to talk about on Monday. So looking forward to that too. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, your week, and we'll see you on Monday.